Well, welcome back to another episode of Finding Your Way with Parenting, Adoptive, Kinship, Foster Parenting. I'm Sky Kirshner here with Deena Shelton, and we've been talking about where do you fit if you want to help, what if you've made a mistake and you want to reconsider doing this, and um, and now I think we'd like to continue the conversation thinking about what it's like, the challenges of parenting and the stresses it can put on the parenting relationship, especially when you're not on the same page in terms of one being more lenient, the other being more tough, let's say. And I'm not saying if you're not on the same page, I'm saying when you're not on the same page. Can I get a amen from you, Deena, on that? Yeah.
Always the
Tell us
case.
about that.
When and
Yeah.
not if.
Yeah. Tell us.
Oh, even the strongest and most connected people have differences in how they see situations, what they value, what they find important or necessary even to address sometimes. And that is not a symptom of an issue in and of itself. Quite the opposite, right? Sky, is if couples aren't disagreeing or seeing things differently, oftentimes it's because one of them's not speaking up
Mm,
and is holding back,
mm,
because people don't see everything the same way. We don't observe things the same way. We take things in differently. We make decisions in different ways. And the best things, especially if you're in a two-parent household, or even if you're in a multi-adult household where maybe it's not even in marriage, or that type of, you are, have an adult child who lives with you and you're doing these things together. If it's two adults that are making decisions together for what is better for children, you have to be able to negotiate and talk through things so that you can provide the best opportunities possible. Not all of us see everything, and we focus on things for a wide variety of reasons, right? Usually our own personal stuff, and having perspective is so valuable. So it is absolutely a when and not if, no matter how healthy, connected, and in agreement people are, just by the nature of who we are as humans.
yeah. Yeah. Sometimes I think about these family systems way of being as these giant icebergs, like a 3 mile long iceberg that's kind of moving along this way. And, in my family, we always did things this way. I'm an only child. So, I didn't have to deal with sibling rivalry and things like that. My wife's iceberg family is over here. She comes from a huge family, and her parents had tons of kids, tons of cousins, and the management of just the way things were organized around things like the dinner table and grabbing food, and there are only 10 donuts and there are 12 kids, and or 13, however it works out, and how do you divide things up. And it's kind of like these two icebergs are kind of moving along, my family's iceberg and all the things I've learned about parenting, and my wife's, and then they friction and they start to collide. But because they're 3 miles long, they're just kind of crashing into each other. And I've kind of learned the hard way, Deena, when I see my wife doing a parenting thing and I just want to roll my eyes, I've learned to keep my mouth shut. And
Silence is absolutely golden, right?
yeah, I'm curious what your sense of is. When is a good time to have these kind of parenting conversations? Like, I'm sure she can see me doing things and she wants to roll her eyes, and I can say, oh, that's not going to work. You know, can't you see that he's pushing back on you already? If you keep telling him he has to do this, or he should do it, you're going to lose him
Mhm.
um, in this conversation. And I'm just kind of curious what you learned about that. Um, you guys do a huddle or something, right? You almost have
We have
formalized.
several tactics.
You do.
You absolutely,
Okay, let's
yes,
hear them.
we have several plays, because, and really what it comes down to, and I say, conversations about parenting, decisions about parenting have to happen outside of the actual parenting,
Mm,
right? We have to have our plans and plays in place, but it's not just about plans and decisions about what we want to see for outcomes for the kids. Because we can both say, yes, our kids are going to be mannered. They're going to,
mm.
use yes, ma'am, and and no sirs,
Respect
and they're
adults.
going
Yes,
to
right.
say please and thank you.
Yeah.
But just agreeing that they're going to be mannered doesn't mean that we agree or realize how often the other person might think that that needs to happen, or when it is or isn't okay
Yeah.
to not use that, or if things are really tense and stressful, is that a time that you hold that line tighter or that you let it go for the bigger picture? Those nuances don't come out. And one, we have
Right.
to normalize
Right.
the process that discipline is built over time and agreements on that. It is a dynamic process, it's not static. You don't just create a list of rules and it go that way.
And by discipline, I'm thinking you don't only mean consequences, but the discipline that's required. For example, in our household, I'm pretty much a stickler. If the kid asks for something, if they don't say please, I'm not giving it to them,
Yeah.
right? But my wife, if the kids ask for something, sometimes she's not, she doesn't see the consistency the same way I do. So
Mhm.
there's a discipline about being consistent. And, if I were to say something in that moment, like, don't give him that, he didn't say please, right? That's not going to go well. And now I'm bringing this conflict. And I love what you're saying. So the time to talk about parenting isn't when you're in the middle of it.
It is
And then
better
there's,
unless it is something that feels very emergency, where you would have a reason to intervene.
yeah.
Otherwise, if it's highly escalating, and maybe your spouse, your partner has a bit of a temper, you feel like it's whether it's actually dangerous or
Mm.
whether it just is a lot more heated, to kind of step in. Otherwise, it's better to just wait and do it afterwards. Like, it's just better to wait.
Or sometimes I think, and I'll be interested in your opinion, not bring it up at all. What I kind of decided is, it's kind of like when kids move from having the same teacher in school, first and second grade. Now they have different teachers. And now you find out some teachers are harder than others. Some check your homework, others give you a pass easily. Some are more consistent and others are less consistent. And that's part of navigating the adult world, right? And so at some point, I kind of decide I'm not even going to bring this up with my wife because I don't think it's going to go well. One, but two, what's wrong with the kids having experiences of adults as different people who have different requirements of them?
Yeah, 100%. And unless that's the foundational problem, that's probably the foundational advice I give people is, one, you have to recognize that your child's relationship with each of you is different.
Mm,
It's The child does have a relationship with the parents. That one needs to be consistent. But the child's individual relationship with each parent may look a little bit different. And as long as that's not threatening the overarching goals of parenting,
mm,
which we have to know what they are to know whether or not they're being threatened,
mm,
um, then you really need to not micromanage the other person's relationship, because they need that individual relationship with each parent, and with other adults in their lives too. Yes, there needs to be boundaries with grandparents, and also it's okay for that relationship to look very different and probably a lot looser, as long as they're not a primary caregiver.
mm,
If they are a primary caregiver in charge of their character development, then they have to have better boundaries, right? So
mm,
it's all about what those roles are. So, for example, with the manners type thing, or the way people converse, that needs to be unique unless it's becoming an overarching problem and the child is being disrespectful across the board. Then
mm,
everyone needs to get involved and be on board with consistency, right?
mm.
But unless that's the case, then there's a lot of space to just let the other person be the kind of parent that they're going to be, and connect with the kids how they're going to connect.
So did you and your husband, I know you've talked about some of your different plays or and when you were talking about, kind of having a shared goal or shared mission, I'm remembering Stephen Covey's wonderful book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective Families, where he talks about, having a family mission statement. And I love the clarity that you're bringing to this, Deena. In our family, we are raising kids who are going to be respectful. We're going to be, raising kids who are going to say, please, thank you, yes, ma'am, and no, ma'am. And and I love that clarity. And so are there times, I've gotten the sense from you that you actually structured into the week times when you talk about like what went well, what parenting things worked well and what maybe didn't go so well. Is that true, or am I making that up in my own head?
Yeah, they're at different times. That's what I meant earlier by this being a dynamic process and not a static process. You
Right.
don't huddle once, decide what the rules are going to be, and then everybody just follow them and they go smoothly. If only, right?
Darn.
It's a constant regeneration and decision on how are we navigating this or managing things. This is coming up. How do we do this? It's got to be an ongoing conversation.
Mm,
And that gets more fluid over time, I think, when you get more comfortable with it.
mm,
In the early days, it was absolutely intentional. We would huddle in the evenings and kind of talk about what was going on or how we felt overwhelmed or didn't, or what was difficult, and make some specific plans. And over the years, we began to adapt ways that we did things. And these are not hard and fast rules, but things like, I said this in another conversation that we had, we started the outside of conversations. There was a couple of times where we saw the other person start to get really frustrated and heated as our kids were turning 8 and 9 and suddenly had all of this extra independence that they decided that they would have because they grow up, right? And we get frustrated, and as we started to notice this, we're getting more and more frustrated, and we did things in ways we didn't really want to do them. And we said, you know what if we just go ahead and say in the outside realm of this, that if I see you getting too frustrated or you see me getting too frustrated, we trust each other because we have the same goal, which is not to respond in frustration to our children. And
mm.
so I can tell you that I am going to tap in, and that language, we choose language around
Like
it so that
a
it's not
like
aggressive in the moment. Yep,
tag
you're
team
going to tap
wrestling or
out
something. You're
and
gonna
I'm going
tap
to
out,
tap
I'm gonna
in. That's
tap in.
exactly right.
Yeah.
Which is kind of a funny image altogether, because it's what it feels like. You end up in this wrestling match with a kid, like, I'm
Yeah.
tapping you out and I'll take over because I didn't start this. I didn't get started in this, and I'll take over and address it from here. And if you get, and when we agreed, if it gets to a point to where we feel like we have to tap in, the other person has to listen and tap out.
Right, and that's and the sooner you can do that tap, the easier, because at a certain point in the buildup of adrenaline and fight or flight, that person who you're wanting to tap out isn't going to want to tap out, right? Because
Exactly.
they're kind of laser focused into it. So I love that, and having that agreement that it is so hard to be willing to disengage when you don't want to, and 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 trust your partner, who the other adult, if you have another adult, um, to be able to represent you together.
hmm And if you don't, these types of boundaries too, when you're a single parent and you're fostering or adopting, it can feel really frustrating too, and really overwhelming because you don't have someone to tap in right there.
Mm,
And what I always say is, and again, as long as sometimes we're in situations where maybe the child is completely dysregulating and then we start to feel it too. We may need to do things, but it's never the wrong choice to pause, stop, and let everything calm down before you pick it back up and move forward. Not addressing it is better than like kind of losing our edge on things and dysregulating with them.
mm,
In most cases, it's better to just pause and let it go. And you might, as a single person or parenting alone, you may have a couple of people that you have as your tap in, tap out, that I'm going
mm,
to tag team and call somebody
mm.
and process and go, this is going on, and get some feedback and some wisdom. And while it may not be that person coming in directly to the kid, or maybe even as they get older, it is, you hand them the phone and it's
Wow.
another trusted adult in their life, that you can
Wow.
get other people involved in these types of things.
Yeah, yeah. I, I'm remembering a time when my wife and I were in the bedroom talking about a parenting decision, and I think one of the things that we learned, which is, a pretty well-known tactic, is you don't always have to give an answer right away, right? You can always, not quite the same as wait till your father gets home, but when you're when when your mom or your dad or whoever comes home, we'll talk about this, and I understand you want this, and let me think about this with the other adult in the house. And I remember my wife and I were in the bedroom with the door shut, and our son came in, and he was very curious. What are you guys doing? We're talking. What are you talking about? We're talking about you. Well, I want to be in on it. I'm sorry, this is parent conversation. We're trying to decide what to do about this thing, and we'll let you know once we made a decision. He was pretty furious about that, and at the same time, it really, established the hierarchy that there's some conversations you're not going to be a part of, and we're gonna decide on your behalf what we think is best for you, and you probably won't like it, or you might not like it, and but until you have a job and have a car and have an apartment and have your own phone,
Mhm.
you're kind of under our control.
Yeah. I always talk to my kids about the balance of privilege and responsibility.
Mm,
The privilege or the autonomy or the authority, depending on their age and what they were asking for.
yeah,
And that the counterbalance has the responsibility. And that, at this point, if I have the responsibility for paying for all of the things and scheduling all of the things and handling all of the things, and I also have the privilege to decide what we're doing
mm,
and how it's going to go and whether we are or aren't going to do something, and that if you want more of that, then you focus on upping your responsibility. You have full control over that. You take more control. You make your own money to ask for things. You save your money and those types of things to
yeah.
balance out. And then I will match. My job is to match those with the authority and privilege that will balance and counterbalance the amount of responsibility you're willing to hold.
I love
And
the way you're putting responsibility first, because frequently people say, with privilege comes like you get the privilege first, then you're no, it's works much better if you eat the vegetables first before the dessert. You live out the responsibility, and then now the privileges come. Are
yeah,
there any other parenting challenges or dilemmas that you've seen that,
yes.
yeah.
Definitely. And one of a really big one that I want to make sure not to forget is the importance of flexibility in
Mm,
your discipline, your parenting. And when I say discipline, she said this earlier too. You're right. I'm not just talking about consequences, and definitely not just talking about punishment, and helping kids frame the idea of discipline in life, of being a practice that we all follow. I am also disciplined. It's
mm,
not in the same way that you are, but this is the way that the roles go. You don't go from having rules as a child to no rules as an adult. It's just your parents' rules to your own rules and laws and your work's rules.
mm,
And we all are following rules. That's part of life. And the point is to grow into that and accept that in a way that you can. So normalizing that rule process
mm,
and the changing and adapting rules and roles as people get older, including increased expectations and increasing the amount of responsibility, and being able to navigate and help them understand this is not just about, we very rarely use the word punishment in our house.
mm,
Every now and then it may feel appropriate, but punishment really insinuates you've done something wrong and now something is going to be done to you that you don't like
mm,
as a result of that. Sometimes that's actually how it's working, and when that's accurate, I think it's fine to use. But discipline is so much more of a bigger picture. It's guidance into the actions that you need to be able to maintain capacity for healthy life and
mm,
function.
mm,
So this is not a talking to people is not going to work for you over the course of your life like this. So
mm,
when you do, we're going to put a halt on it, and whatever it is you're talking about, it's not happening.
mm,
Period.
mm,
Right?
mm,
Complaining about every single thing that comes in front of you is not going to be a life situation. It's going to go well for you with relationships. So if you complain about food every time you sit at the table, from here on out, I will just take your plate. I will trust you and believe you that you don't want to eat it, and we will go with that.
yeah.
But once you've said it, it's done, and that's the answer. Those types of things where that's discipline and guidance. It's not necessarily, I don't like that you're complaining, so I'm going to punish you by taking your food. It's, I will believe you that you don't want to eat that. if you say it. So be
Yeah.
very careful
Yeah.
about
Your
what you
words have
say.
an impact on the people around you.
And then as adults, being able to navigate and realize when our kids are at new stages and we need to adapt, because the minute you get your handle on it, the minute you get your handle and you feel like your kids are in a good rhythm, they hit a new development stage and it all, we say, why am I having to teach them this all over again? It's like they woke up and they forgot it. And there's a little bit of that that's actually true. That they hit a new development stage, their brain's developing, they can think about different things, and you have to train the new parts of their brain to do the stuff that you expect to. So you learn to expect the expectation piece that you're going to have to redo and redo and redo with development. And in the same way as parents, that we adapt and adjust. So there came a time with some of the frustration as the kids got older, instead of tapping out, we decided to give each other permission to maybe say gently to the other person something about the way it was happening, so that we could model for the kids listening to
Mm.
someone call us out in love and
Mm.
responding by changing our behavior.
Wow.
And that became the new normal, because they were at an age where that was appropriate. They had the abstract thinking to realize we weren't in contention, that we were actually aligning for a message. And that's more similar to what we practice now, so they can hear us being guided and changing too. And that's important to them because
That's
they're
lovely.
teenagers.
Yeah. The
Mhm.
amount of mindfulness that requires to say, we're doing this partially because we're conscious, we're mindful that we're modeling what it's like to work out a disagreement with each other. We've got one more minute. Do you want to have the last word on this one?
Sure. The biggest thing about all of this with between the adults is that it's all intentional. We call it meta processing.
Mm.
And it's really probably more important for you to talk with the other adults who are helping you raise the children, whether it's spouses or other family members, to talk about how you're doing discipline and guidance, even more than what you're disciplining and guiding.
Mm.
And so just making sure that you're prioritizing and valuing those conversations and giving space for those, again, sometimes even more than the actual issues, because those are going to switch out as they change and age. And then as they move forward, a lot of that's going to pass and shift around. So you need your processes in order. And that is an ongoing developmental piece. It's never just set in stone and then fall apart. You're just constantly working on it, and just rest in that.
Yeah. And if you're not familiar with the word meta process, it's one of our therapist words that just means talking about something that happened. So like debriefing something, or, can I give you feedback on it? It's just kind of thinking about, how did that go, and what parts went well and what parts didn't, what do we want to carry into the future? Deena, it's always good talking with you. Thanks for being with us for another episode of Finding Your Way with Parenting, Adoptive Kinship Care, and Parenting. I'm Sky Kirshner here with Deena Shelton, and join us again for the next episode.
Thanks, everybody.